Anderson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Cass Allen over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen did ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What's up, Bruin Bible listeners? This is your host, Will Decker. We are brought to you today by the good people at BetOnline. It is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports, contests, and events with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, such as MMA and boxing, esports, and even golf. I'm going to be placing some big-time bets this year. NFL, we're talking about Rams-Chargers Super Bowl. That's my prediction. Going to be placing some future odds on that. MLB, I might be placing a bet on the Dodgers to make the World Series as well, given the year that they've had so far in the regular season. I'm going to be using it for all my MMA bets. Loving when a good fight's coming up. The Nate Diaz fight coming up this Saturday. Going to be putting a nice wager on that through BetOnline. Head on over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to join today and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50 to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. What is up, Bruin fans? Did some game happen last night that maybe we're unaware of? Obviously, we are starting this episode off with a little bit of humor. UCLA football, primetime game. 4-0, or as a lot of sports writers around America called us, the worst 4-0 team in the country, playing at home against a ranked Washington opponent. And when four quarters were over, it was a 40-32 victory for your UCLA Bruins. A night with many highlight performances and moments that I think Bruin fans will cherish for a long, long time. The Rose Bowl had energy we hadn't seen in a long time, so that was just a validating feeling for us coming for people that have covered UCLA, covered Westwood week in and week out for you. I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, a guy that watched the game with his dad, who was a UCLA grad. Madman obviously went to graduate school at UCLA as well. Just give me what it was like to watch that game with Papa Madni and yourself and just enjoying a moment where UCLA football felt like it was back.
Yeah, no, Thriller. It was great to be here. You know, my dad's been a diehard fan for 60 years, has lived through the ups, the downs, the cardiac arrest that takes place when you're a Bruin lifer. And, had some buddies over as well. And, you could feel the energy. It was such an interesting start. Washington marches down the field. They go for it on 4th and 6. They pop in for that touchdown. UCLA comes back down the field. Gets aided by some penalty yards in that return game, makes a couple completions, and then the drive stalls on 4th and goal at the 3-yard line. It was 2nd and goal at the 3, and they don't give the ball to Charbonnet any of those 3 plays, and some clunky plays, and you're like, oh my God, here we go again. And then things changed and changed quickly. Latu's, pressure and that drop and that safety seemed to just sort of calm the team down, and then they subsequently marched the field, and Washington just could never really stop them at all throughout the game. So it was just such a joy, and we're getting really excited now about next week potentially in a game day audience with the Utes of Utah, and I know there's going to be some fun rivalry even within the network, Thriller, of UCLA Utah. We're going to have a lot of fun with it this week.
If you like debates that go a little bit heated, maybe over the line a little bit, you're going to love it this week when we got our buddy Stephen Haglund coming on, talking with Jamal Madni. UCLA versus Utah, two maybe the biggest fans in those programs, so it's going to be a blast to do that. And you mentioned it, man. We get stuffed on 4th and goal. It was just kind of a rollout play that, a receiver was not available at all on the left side. And we're already down 7-0. It was not feeling great, but that momentum shift of the fumble from Talapala, the running back from Washington, Latu coming in there, near touchdown, but we get the safety, we get the ball back, and we respond immediately on the next drive. That is one of the bigger momentum shifts I can remember for a UCLA football game where, and in a moment, it looks like it's all lost, and then with the snap of the fingers, the Bruins are right back in the game, was such a beautiful sequence of events for UCLA. And, we could start in a lot of different ways with this podcast on who was great, who stood out. But we got to give credit where it's due. And we came on a couple weeks ago, saying is Garbers kind of in the running to maybe take the spot. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was maybe the best I've ever seen him as the quarterback at UCLA. And I know a lot of fans would bring up, the USC game last year. USC was not a ranked opponent. They were factually pretty bad last year. DTR put it all together this week, Madman. 24 of 33 through the air, 315 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10 carries, 53 yards, and a touchdown. He was kind of icing the game, with his runs to the outside, and maybe made the play of the night where he had a near interception to a defensive lineman. He got in on the play with a guy that was 3 times his size and batted the ball away to keep the possession with UCLA. I mean, what more could Dorian Thompson-Robinson do for this team to win? He was unbelievable last night, Jamal.
No, Thriller, I think you said it best, and really one of the signature performances of his career. You mentioned, obviously, the SC game, that great comeback win against Washington State from a couple of years ago, 67-63. But this was the first time this type of performance against a top 15 team, and both for him as well as for Chip Kelly. Chip came in 0-6 against top 15 competition as head coach of UCLA. And so to be able to put it all together against a quality opponent is really what sticks out. And I think we have to start, Will, a little bit with the scheme. And I think that a lot of folks expected a heavy dose of Charbonnet early, especially given the ebbs and flows of his career of sometimes forcing the issue early in games. And Chip basically gave him the keys from the get-go. I mean, even that first drive, it was all throws, essentially just one run to Charbonnet, and said, look, we're going to go as far as you take us. This is the accumulation now of a 5-year journey that you and I have gone on together. And this is the year, and this is the moment where it all comes together. And my God, he completely delivered. And I think a couple things really stand out for me, Will. One was, you mentioned that great tip ball, and he jars it from the D lineman. Hurdle 2, dare we say, last week in that SC Oregon State game, it was called kind of Bush Push 2. This was Hurdle 2. And then that side step on that quarterback keeper, the end zone where both Washington guys collide. I mean, it looked like something in a movie, something that you'd see on any given Sunday. So, I mean, the highlights were just abundant. And then I think what really calmed DTR was what you and I have been predicting now for weeks, and that is the separation of Jake Bobo being wide receiver 1. And when you have a security blanket in Jake Bobo, the 6 catches, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns, and just the countless catches in traffic on third down, when you have that, then it allows your progressions to really be able to create a lot of variety, because you can do a lot of eye manipulation with the defense when hey, if things go south, let me go to Bobo. And I think that really calmed DTR in a way and gave him poise through the air that we just haven't seen before. And I think that, accompanied with his sheer athleticism, the trust from Chip, having a wide receiver 1, you saw it all come together in this beautiful way. And how fitting that it was his 40th career start and arguably the greatest start of his career.
And if Jake Bobo doesn't calm you down, I'd like to know what does as a quarterback, because this man is incapable of making an huge catch. I'm trying to find the right words because of his performance. I'll go through the catches with you. His first catch, 3rd and 7, 22-yard gain to Bobo. Second catch, 3rd and 4, that was the 40-yard gain he had.
Yep.
1st and 10 in the red zone, Bobo, touchdown, huge play. 3rd and 10. Jake Bobo on his 4th catch, 14 yards, move the sticks. 1st and 15, Bobo, the 39-yard house call for his second score of the game. And his last catch, 3rd and 3 for 15 yards. All 6 of his catches were significant, and the only 2 catches he didn't make on third downs were touchdowns. Jake Bobo was huge in a way that we have not seen at the UCLA position in a long time. And Madman, I was on the sidelines watching the opening week with Bowling Green, and we knew he was a big receiver. He had size. What I didn't understand was the precision he has in his routes. For a 6'5" guy, this guy is very agile and very quick with his feet to get in and out of breaks. I mean, the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy was in the house last night. He had quite a few tweets, going, Jake Bobo, this guy's going to be a deal, when all is said and done. Bobo was the star of the show in a lot of ways too. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Bobo, that combination, I think, is what allowed UCLA to take it against Washington. So Jake Bobo, I mean, he's going to be in the running for either the first or second game ball we give out later. And the guy we got to go to is Charbonnet, man. Zach Charbonnet, it's just the little things he does. For instance, second half, we get the back-to-back false start penalties. And it's, 2nd and 18. And he just takes a screen pass 18 yards to get the first down. That is such a little microcosm of what he brings to this team. He has bailed out UCLA's offense in so many different ways, in so many different areas over the games that we've seen him have. And just another classic performance for Charbonnet, 22 carries, 124 yards, and a touchdown. And the area that we've really seen him open up to is his pass catching ability. We saw it a little bit last year in the LSU game, the Fresno State game, but it's really kind of become, a hallmark of his game. 3 catches, 56 yards, and all of those were huge as well, all going for first downs. Madman. Charbonnet is on the short list for me of all-time favorite Bruins already. I think he could be in the running to pass my all-time favorite, Greg Dulcich. What does Charbonnet mean to this program?
He's everything, Will. He is, DTR obviously gets so much of the pub because of his journey. He's the quarterback. He's got the flair for the dramatic, the intention with the spectacular. But everything begins and ends with Charbonnet, and everything becomes then a counter off of what we do with Charbonnet. But I have to give Chip Kelly a lot of credit here, Will, in terms of Charbonnet's performance last night. Because if you watched the first 2-3 drives of that game, getting the ball to Charbonnet was difficult. That thick Washington Huskies defensive line, especially in the middle, in terms of run blocking capabilities, really made things challenging for Charbonnet. He, at one point in the game, he only had 10 carries for 34 yards. And what Chip was able to do over the course of that first half and then getting into that second half was getting him touches on the outside. He really leveraged the option game well. He leveraged kind of the quick shovel pass game well. He leveraged that screen pass that you mentioned. And that got Charbonnet into open space, got a lather going, got a rhythm going, and it started deflating that Washington Huskies defensive line because you were putting lateral strain on the defense, and that made them more susceptible up the middle. And then you saw those patented Charbonnet 9-yard, 11-yard, 13 yards runs up the middle. And so Charbonnet was spectacular. The bruiser, the receiver, you mentioned the Fresno State game last year, the LSU game last year. He was so critical receiving the ball in that Stanford game last year as well. And so to see that whole package come together last night, and I think, Will, all-time great Troy Aikman has had a lot to say about this UCLA program, and rightfully so, as one of the all-time greats. He was part of one of the iconic teams in the NFL, and what was their kind of ethos and nickname? Remember, they were the triplets. It was Troy, Emmett, and Michael Irvin. And I think UCLA has a set of triplets on their hand now, with DTR, Charbonnet, and Bobo being the clear stars of this team. And I think the birth of the Bruin triplets for this 2022 campaign is how I'm going to remember this game last night.
Remember it, you will. And the offense went over 500 yards of total offense again. I got a couple things I want to bring up because Chip Kelly, this was kind of a game where it felt like he could take back a little bit of his image, a little bit of his spotlight, because it's been, a little while since in college football, since Chip Kelly has really had a moment like this on a national scale. LSU was to an extent last year, but it kind of fizzled at the end. This feels a little different. I think Twitter was kind of responding that Chip Kelly could be officially back. And, we had Brentley Weissman on this week, who told us, there's maybe 3 or 4 guys that I would take over Chip Kelly calling an offense in the world right now. And Chip, lived up to the hype. You mentioned it, was able to kick it out to the outside with, the option plays with DTR and Charbonnet, things like that, avoiding the Braylon Trices and the Jeremiah Martins on the inside. Was this the most impressed you've ever been with Chip calling an offense? I think it's weird to ask that as a UCLA fan, but I'm trying to find a time where I can, think of Chip being as good as he was last night.
Will, it's a bold statement. It's a strong statement. I will say that this was one of the most impressive moments I've seen Chip call a UCLA offense, certainly. But I think we sometimes fail to forget, how explosive and potent that Oregon offense was. I was there live when he hung 62 on SC. I mean, that was just a masterclass in play calling with LaMichael James and Kenyon Barner and DeAnthony Thomas. And Chip has done some incredible things in this sport. And as David Shaw has rightfully said, one of the true kind of founding fathers of modern college football with the spread offense. But I think where it all came together for me is that this was one of the most complete games that he's called at UCLA. And I think it speaks to the trust that now he has in A, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, B, a true five-star bell cow in Zach Charbonnet, and C, a true number one in Jake Bobo. Last year he got criticized a bit for the formations were a little bit too bunched. He didn't give Dulcich the ball enough in space, maybe a little bit overly reliant on Phillips, not enough explosive plays. In the past, he's been criticized for maybe, not managing run pass option appropriately, not managing time of possession appropriately, questionable fourth down attempts. Last night, you saw it sort of all come together because, look, it takes time, and the cupboard was bare when Chip inherited this team at the end of the Mora era. He needed to infuse his identity, his mindset. He's taking very much of a Moneyball approach to building this UCLA roster through the transfer portal. It's now all coming together for him. And he was in the zone and he was dialed in. When was the last time, Will, we saw DTR have a great game, Charbonnet and a running back have a great game, and a wide receiver one all have a great game? Two of those three things have happened in the past under Kelly when things are going really well, but it's never really happened when all three of those things have happened, and it happened last night. And so for those reasons, I agree with you. It's right up there in terms of great games that he's called at UCLA.
Yeah, and I was more referring to the UCLA side of things, just as a fan of the program. For me, that's the best game he's ever called at UCLA. And, it wasn't without faults. Those 2 fourth down opportunities that were failed, it works if you get them. But if you don't get them, you got to take the criticism. So it was a tough situation there. Luckily, we were able to bounce back with that. And what I would say to the transfer portal critics and things like that, I think everyone would want a Latu, a Bobo, a Charbonnet. If you can continually bring these guys into the program, sign me up for Transfer U. I think when you're getting these quality of players that are going to be playing on Sundays that are making these types of impacts, I mean, we've talked about it. The receiver position at UCLA for, decades has been kind of bare. When you look at what USC, the crosstown rival, has had in terms of arguably being wide receiver U. Jake Bobo, I'm telling you right now, I think this guy can be a 3rd or 4th round pick in the NFL draft if all goes as well. The height, the size, the, agility, the hands, everything there. Latu, he may have to pass a medical test, which would be scary, but that's another guy, your NFL level talent that you're getting in the transfer portal. And we don't even have to talk about Charbonnet because I think he's going to be a top 3 to 5 running back. So when you're consistently bringing that level of talent from the transfer portal in, the critics can hate all they want that Chip doesn't recruit, but he's bringing winning players to this program. It's clearly showing up, in our wins and loss record as we're 5-0 to start this year for UCLA. So,
Will, arguably the 5 best players on UCLA outside of DTR are all transfers. When you look at Bobo from Duke, Charbonnet from Michigan, the Murphy twins from North Texas, when you look at Latu from Washington, throw in Muasau as well, those are all transfers, and that's probably most Bruin fans, analysts, and boosters would say that's probably your core 6 after DTR. So, it's one thing to be able to replenish your roster. It's one thing to be able to fill holes in your roster, but to actually find transfers that are the stars of your team and find them at key positions and then mesh them together, it really says something. And as much criticism as Chip has gotten over the years, this is an opportunity to shine praise on him because he certainly deserves it. Will, this is, an 8-game winning streak now. This is tied for the 2nd longest winning streak in all of college football. And the last time UCLA won 8 games in a row was when they started 2005, 8-0. And so this is really significant. We're getting into some really significant areas in terms of this program and what the possibilities could be here in the next 60 days.
And you mentioned at the beginning of the show, game day has got a chance to come to Westwood.
Oh, yeah.
A reason to get excited for UCLA as they will be taking on the Utah Utes next week, who, if they take care of business against a very talented Oregon State team, I think people at the LA Football Network gained a lot of respect for the Beavers last week and what they were doing to USC. But if they take care of business this week, that's going to be 2 ranked teams playing each other. What would it mean for the UCLA alums like yourself to have a game day experience come in for what is typically considered a basketball school by others around?
Yeah, well, I mean, last year was so significant when Oregon came to town, and it was the first time UCLA hosted game day since 1998. And so, just the pageantry of that day, and it was so unique because so much of the pageantry and the activities were taking place on campus all throughout the day, and then sort of the party shifted to the Rose Bowl at night. I think for the community, for the fans, for the alums, for everyone who's associated with UCLA, to see football be great again would really be so special because, in the glory days of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, UCLA still to this day, Will, is the only school in the history of the NCAA that had the college basketball player of the year and the Heisman Trophy winner, the winner be the same year. Gary Beeman and Kareem won those respective trophies in the same year. That's never happened. So there has been historical precedent when UCLA has it rolling with both sports. Very few, if any, schools can sort of match that. And it's been a long time. And obviously so much money in college sports now and sort of this push and need for specialization. But if UCLA can sort of push the envelope and challenge SC and be a great football team again, oh my goodness, it just unlocks so much spirit and pageantry, and it would mean so much. And I think what's so spectacular about this, Will, is, could this be a year where we potentially have the crosstown rivalry be a top 15, a top 10 matchup? Everyone remembers 88, Troy Aikman versus Rodney Peete. So many people remember 2005, the iconic USC team led by Reggie Bush against, the 6th ranked Bruins that were led by Maurice Jones-Drew. And so is this the third act to that potentially? And is it going to set up that way? Caleb versus DTR, first time in the history of this incredible rivalry that you have 2 African-American quarterbacks on each side of the line. And so what that could mean. So there's just so much here to uncover. And Will, it's just so exciting. And this is that necessary momentum that UCLA needs to go to the Big Ten. This is the year. When you look at year 5 of DTR, when you look at Charbonnet, this is the last year. When you look at Bobo, this is the last year. And the defense, it's all come together for this year. If UCLA is going to stand up and say, we want to be relevant in football year over year as we go into the Big Ten, and there's another program in LA as well, it's not just USC. This is the year to solidify that. And so the urgency, the excitement, the buzz now, it's all coming together for a very, very magical fall here in Los Angeles.
Magical fall it is. And you made a huge proclamation as this season started, saying that UCLA is going to make it to the Rose Bowl.
Yep.
Have you wavered off that claim, or is
No.
it just more fuel to the fire after seeing a team, come in and beat a ranked opponent in Washington?
Well, it just reinforces it. I just felt that this year coming in, when you look at how the schedule broke, when you look at the level of experience that's coming back at head coach, at quarterback, at running back, at receiver, and the defense, when you look and see at the landscape of the Pac-12, I think Utah is a little overrated. I think it's still going to take SC some time. This is only year 1 of Lincoln Riley to really get everything going the way they want to. And when you sort of put all those chess pieces together, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, meets timing. I just thought all of those factors fell into UCLA's favor to eliminate that 24-year drought since 98 going to the Rose Bowl. and since 86 winning the Rose Bowl. And so this is that magical year. And I have felt so confident about that at the beginning of the year. And there's no reason to jump off of that now. And I think 10-2 and a 7-2 conference record is very much on the table, if not potentially more.
And we love to hear it, UCLA fans. We're going to need you to pack the Rose Bowl next Saturday with the Utah Utes coming in there. I want to give a huge shout out to the crowd because we have been getting killed for it as fans of UCLA football. And, it wasn't those big, huge SEC Big Ten crowds, but it was 40,000 around there. And let me tell you, every one of those 40,000 fans were felt during that game. Forced 2 early timeouts from Washington and a false start in the second half. So just want to give a lot of shout out and a lot of love to the Bruin faithful that came out and had their voices heard loud and proud for UCLA, making it happen.
And Will, if I could just add to that, with a huge shout out goes to athletic director Martin Jarman. And he did a lot this week and a lot over the course of the last 8 or 9 days, promoting the game, encouraging everyone to come out. There was the light show at halftime playing California Love, all of the tectonics and the flashing lights that were taking place. Jarman had a lovely letter, an excused absence letter that he personally signed and sent it out to all of the Bruin Nation to just fill out whether you needed to miss work or you needed to miss school or you needed to miss religious commitments or what have you, family commitments, to come out at the Rose Bowl. So that creativity, that energy, that spirit, that innovation is really also why we love Martin Jarman. And so huge game ball and shout out to Martin Jarman as well.
Yeah, unofficial game ball to friend of the show, Martin Jarman. We got a lot of
the real MJ, right, Will?
Yes, the real MJ. Yeah, Michael Jordan could take number 2 to our guy, Martin Jarman. And just another quick shout out before we get to the game balls. Hudson Habermill rocking the shades on the sideline like he's in a Top Gun movie. I wear my sunglasses at night. The song just from the 80s came up on that. Habermill made the game-sealing catch. He's not going to get a game ball for me, but I just want to give a cool shout-out. That gives UCLA the personality that connects with the fans around. Hudson Habermill, my guy, making a big-time play and wearing the big-time shades. Game ball.
A really funny story there. My dad saw that with him on the sideline. He's like, "Who is this guy?" I was like, "That's Hudson Habermill." Wearing the shades. And in Indian cinema in Bollywood, the leading actor, is not called the leading actor. The term is coined hero. He is the hero. And so my dad's like, so from kind of that Bollywood term, he's kind of like, okay, so he's the hero of the team. He's acting like the hero. So Hudson Hero Habermill, Triple
Hero Habermill, man. We're gonna make the shirts for LAFB. You guys can get the Bollywood LAFB spinoff. It's gonna be perfect. And just credit to the staff. This guy was a walk-on tight end that's turned into a talented player. This is the second tight end we've done this in a row with Greg Dulcich going to the next level. I personally think Habermill has a chance to, make an NFL roster if he's able to get that ceiling of his going. So Hudson Habermill, or Hudson Hero Habermill, if we will, stepping up, making big plays. Game balls, man. This is going to be a really fun one. It's going to be, a game ball that I think listeners of the Bruin Bible will really love because this is arguably the most important win we've had since SC of last year. I'm going to let you start. You can go in any which way or direction here for the game ball. Who are you going with and why, Mad?
Will, it's hard. There's a few, obviously, that jumped to mind. It's hard to sort of pick the first one, but you sort of have to here. And I'm going to go with Dorian. And I think that, obviously, the numbers speak for themselves. You mentioned all the stats, over 300 yards, the 3 touchdowns, over 50 yards rushing, and sort of the 3 total touchdowns, 2 passing, 1 rushing. But it was also his mindset. I think that, it was very obvious that he came in, there was no theatrics. He wasn't, sort of engaging in any sort of jawing with the opponent. There was nothing sort of extracurricular. He was just so locked in and focused. And you could see how at the end of that game, he sort of let out this burst of emotion because he sort of channeled it and bottled it up. And I think he understands the need to sort of harness his athleticism, his spirit, his competitiveness, but channel it in a very positive way. And so statistically, he was incredible, but emotionally, he was also incredible. And so you have to start there. It's not creative. It's not something that's out of the box, but it was definitely a signature performance, and he's getting all of the praise today, and rightfully so.
And just a great obvious choice. You mentioned him letting out the emotion, after a huge victory like that. And with Thompson Robinson, it was liberating to see that as a fan, because we've seen the potential, we've seen what he can do. And for me, the biggest thing with DTR was no turnovers. Even in his biggest games, the USC game, LSU, he had turnovers, 4 touchdowns and no turnovers. He was the maestro of the offense. He set the tone and delivered in ways that we haven't seen at the UCLA quarterback position, probably since the likes of Brett Hundley, if I'm being honest. So what a performance from DTR. He is well deserving of the first game ball. I think number 2, we got to go to the guy that, he connected with the most, and that's Jake Bobo. We had been waiting and waiting. It was like, the first 3 games, they kind of used him sparingly, and maybe that was by design because these games didn't really matter a lot. But, man, when Bobo got his number called, you mentioned timing, or luck is timing and preparation kind of mixed together. When he got his number called, boy, did he make the most of it. I leapt up off my couch at that 40-yard touchdown to kind of put us away and put us, with Washington kind of in the rear view at that point. He makes a defender miss in the open field and cuts to the outside and burns a safety for a touchdown. This guy's a 6'5", big-bodied receiver. They're not supposed to be doing that at that size. What Bobo brought to the table, we mentioned, just how he's incapable of making a non-huge catch. Like, this guy can only make big plays. Like, it's just in his DNA. Bobo's an easy case. And I want to ask you this. J.J. Stokes is kind of the main best receiver in the history of UCLA football. Does he have a chance at being number 2 in the history of UCLA when all is said and done after just 1 year on campus for the Bruins?
Well, I think he's got a chance to put together one of the great receiving seasons in UCLA history. And you mentioned it, and I think there's a couple of factors there at play. One is, in many ways, it was Bobo's coming out party, not from a production standpoint, not necessarily from a size standpoint, because we saw those things. We saw those things at Duke. We saw his physicality. Chip had a lot of conversations with David Cutcliffe before, making that decision of bringing Bobo over. So we knew what the ingredients were. I think the biggest surprise with Bobo was his agility and his ability to make cuts with the ball and be such a yards after the catch type of threat at 6'5", with that frame. That combination of size and agility is what's so rare in the game. And that's why he's going to be such a great NFL prospect. And then when you look at that second dimension, and Will, you said it, 6 catches, 4 on third down, the other 2 on first down for touchdowns. And so think about what that really means. He is the table setter for that offense. That DTR, when he wants to go big, when he wants to sort of set the tone on a drive, he's going to Bobo. And then when you have that, that allows your game to open up and do all of these other variations and derivatives from an offensive standpoint. And so those 2 dimensions, with the fact that now you go through this gauntlet, if he puts together another great game against Utah and potentially another great game against Oregon and another great game against SC, yes, you are talking about one of the great wide receiver Bruin seasons, not just because of production, but because of the how and also because of the timing in big games.
And you mentioned it too, like when DTR needs a big play, that's who he goes to. We saw it. South Alabama, that was the turning point for the UCLA offense, was that huge 40-yard catch near the sideline that he had to lay out to make the play. We saw it with Colorado even in the first half, when we're stringing together those drives. He made a tightly contested third down catch near the left sideline. You were at both those games, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Bobo, it's hard for me not to love this guy. I mean, he is the best receiver I can remember as someone that's covered UCLA, and I think he's got a chance to really break some records this year. Maybe not.
Will, I don't think it's Charbonnet for you, Will. I think it's Bobo. I think move over, Greg Dulcich. Jake Bobo has now stolen Will the Thrill Decker's heart. Expect Valentine's Day cards and flowers, Jake Bobo, from Mr. Dirty Chai Decker.
What's your address, Jake Bobo? We'll send it over. A little LAFB bouquet. We'll make sure it happens. But I love both these guys. And that's just a testament to this team and how good we think they could be. When two of your all-time favorite players that you've covered are both playing at the same time, I mean, it's just a magical, magical thing. And UCLA is doing everything right now, man. So, Bobo, number 2 game ball. We got to go in that direction. Madman, 3rd game ball. You're 2nd. Who are you going with and why?
Well, I could go Charbonnet. I could go Latu. And I'm going to go Latu because I think that for me, obviously we talked about, the significance of that play on the second drive, being able to disrupt what Washington was doing down, 7-0, and they had the ball. But it was his incessant pressure, especially on 3rd and long on Michael Penix Jr. That's where the game turned for me, Will. Washington got a little bit sloppy with some penalties, some offensive holding, some false starts, set them back behind the chains. And it was Latu's pressure, both at the times that he got to Penix Jr., as well as when Penix Jr. kind of felt the footsteps, that ultimately led to either other guys getting sacks or the 2 key interceptions that allowed UCLA to get the cushion to then be able to hold it off here in the second half. And so obviously we're going crazy over the triplets and the offense and everything there. And sometimes it's hard to sort of see great defense when 2 teams have combined for nearly 1,000 yards and 72 points. But UCLA does not win that game with Latu. And we talk so much about his story. And so this beautiful kind of poetic irony and literary justice, if you will, that he has this great game against Washington, the team where he came from after his multiple medical surgeries. So just a beautiful story all around. So I got to go with Latu.
And when they do the game day feature next week, when they can highlight a profile of a player, I think they got to go with Latu, just the story he's had, the medical retirement, him transferring to UCLA, finally getting clearance after not playing since 2019, and him just making the most of it. He is leading the Pac-12 in sacks. He's top 5 in the country in sacks right now with 6 in 5 games played. And you mentioned it. The play that shifted everything was the fumble from Talapala near the end zone. And the first guy there was Latu. And it felt like that the whole game, even the Bo Calvert sack at the end of the game where Calvert got in the backfield and made a play. Latu was just this much further behind. And I think, with the offensive line, the pressure they felt from Latu, it allowed a guy like Calvert to slide in and make the sack. So spot on with that. The sack he had on 3rd down to just kind of stall Washington was massive. Latu, just a dude's dude, and I think he's got a legitimate shot to take the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, arguably since the first time since a guy like Anthony Barr. So I'm really, really excited for our guy Latu. That is game ball number 3. I could go Charbonnet here. And, a large part of me wants to do it, but I'm going to go with a guy that may shock some people. I'm going to go with Stephen Blaylock. 5th-year senior, gets the big first interception against Penix, proving that he's a human being coming into this game, as he was 2nd in the country in passing yards, 12 touchdown to 1 interception ratio coming into this game. Blaylock makes the interception. Just a big moment for a guy that has been with this program through the lows of the early Chip Kelly tenure to now the highs where you're on a national primetime game, beating a ranked opponent. And the other play that's not really talked about was UCLA. It was early in the second half, and Washington gets a touchdown. They go for 2. And Blaylock actually knocked away the 2-point conversion, which at that point kept it at a 3-possession game. So I got to give just due to the guy that Chip Kelly brought to media day as the leader of his defense, Stephen Blaylock. Just a great redemption story for a guy that I think is going to be, walking away this year with hopefully, knock on wood, a Rose Bowl appearance. What do you think about Stephen Blaylock out there in the secondary, Madman?
Well, I think it was huge. Absolutely. I think his interception was great. The return, you mentioned the conversion. And I think just being able to set the tone of resistance for the secondary, especially after that first drive went the way it did. And especially after even that second drive, before that Latu sack that was so critical. And then Washington had that doink field goal right for their second score. they were moving the ball, and the secondary was really struggling with these crossing routes, and these underneath crossing routes, really having a hard time staying in front of these great Washington receivers. And so that interception, kind of turned the momentum, gave UCLA an extra possession when they were moving the ball so well, but it also kind of set the tone for the rest of the game for the secondary to say, hey, it's okay. We can play aggressive because we're going to win on some of these battles. And we also have our offense, there to sort of pick up some of the slack, even if we make some misses. And so Blaylock's play was significant, but then what that play meant later in the game was even more significant, you could argue. And so I completely agree. And it's always great to see a secondary guy get some love after, they've been much maligned at the start of this season.
And it's been tough. And I know a lot of fans were critical last night of the secondary play. But what I would argue is Washington's receiving core with Penix at the quarterback, that's a top 3, passing attack.
There were multiple NFL receivers out on the field. And so I think those criticisms are a little bit unfair. I mean, no one is going to – this UCLA secondary isn't Georgia. It isn't Alabama. This is a good, solid, hardworking unit that had to play really NFL caliber guys. Adunzo made some incredible catches just with his hands, behind his hips in front of himself. I mean, it was quite significant. And so I thought they played really well. The UCLA secondary competed really hard.
McMillan was fantastic. And, maybe we just need to kind of flip the perception of that, because I think UCLA's secondary is in a lot of ways we should be aligning with what USC is doing. Does USC have a top-notch secondary? No, but they can force the turnover. If we can just win the turnover battle, get a pick or two each game, kind of get those ball hawks going with the Kirkwoods, the Jalen Davies, the Mo Oslings back there. Azizi Hearn, too. I mean, he made a big play to force the fourth down.
Absolutely.
Early in the game, I want to give a shout-out to that play. But if we can just win the turnover battle and not make mistakes, I think, the secondary can be comparable. And yet every right to criticize them against Colorado. Let's pump the brakes a little bit against Michael Penix, who came into this game second in the nation in passing yards with some NFL receivers, as you mentioned.
And Andre Ware was ready to anoint him the Heisman Trophy before the game and was doubling down on that. So Penix Jr. was certainly in very, very high regard nationally with a lot of Heisman voters. And so to be able to compete against that, especially at the you could argue Penix Jr. was the quarterback of college football in September. And so to have to compete with that and those receivers, they really did a great job and were opportunistic when they needed to be and made some huge plays. I mean, you talk about Azizi Hearn, that tip in the end zone late in the third quarter. I mean, Penix dropped an absolute dime. I think it was to McMillan, and Azizi Hearn at the last minute, there was that offsides and he went deep. And Azizi Hearn made that tip at the last second to sort of prolong that drive. So there were some great plays out there.
And from transitive property of Andre Ware, no longer Michael Penix. How about our guy DTR?
Yeah,
hopefully we'll keep that up there.
Just shift over. Just shift the money over to the next stock, right?
We should have made that preseason bet. It just for the Heisman odds. It's still a long shot at this point, but him winning those games, maybe he can string something together against Utah and Oregon. And at that time, in a couple weeks, maybe we're talking about some legitimate Heisman case for our guy DTR. 4 game balls in, 2 more to go. You're on your last one, Madman. We have a guy that's still on the board that's pretty obvious. I think I know where you're going, and it's well-deserved.
Thriller, there's the obvious one. We love him. He's the Terminator. But I want to give Chip Kelly a game ball because I called a great game. And I think there was some nuances there that I think a lot of other storylines are going to sort of dominate the next couple of games. But his trust we talked about in DTR to kind of give him sort of the ball and say, you're going to win it or lose it, but this is sort of a culmination of a 5-year journey. I think his ability to get Charbonnet out in space laterally when things were really clogged up early. Charbonnet doesn't have the game that he does without Chip Kelly. 3, finding the right matchups in bunch formation with Bobo to really exploit some open field stuff was really critical. And then I think his counter with Bobo. Look, Cam Brown had a great game. TMA caught a really nice pass. He tried to get Kaz Allen the ball early. So I just think overall he called a wonderful game, and it really kind of came together. So Chip gets my last game ball.
It's awesome to see Chip too. You mentioned the 8-game win streak he's on, starting off the year 5-0, and man, just another game of 500 yards of total offense. That man can call an offense like nobody else within the Pac-12 for my money. Last game ball's got to be Charbonnet. Just a dude's dude. 22 carries, 124 yards, and a touchdown. And I want to be respectful when I say this. I don't even think he's playing behind a very good offensive line. I expected the interior to be the strength of this line. They were getting blown up by Trice and Martin all game. The tackles are obviously new offensive line coaching, Tim Derevno. So we've lost a lot of talent on the line, and Charbonnet is still, getting his yards at 22 carries, 124 yards, and a touchdown. We mentioned the receiving yards he was able to possess, 3 catches, 56 yards, what he was able to do in open space. And just, man, he looks like the Terminator in all of its glory out there on the football field week in and week out. So we love Charbonnet. A couple other guys I want to bring to the table. Cam Brown, week in and week out, UCLA has the luxury of not maybe needing a solidified wide receiver number 2 because that position group is so deep. TMA had some moments. Cam Brown had some moments. I'd feel comfortable if Logan Loya was our second option out there at times. So I really want to give a shout out to Cam Brown. 5 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown. Really did his thing there. And John Vance, half tackle for a loss, had that second interception where it really felt like the momentum was building for UCLA and peaking at that point. Grayson Murphy, half of a tackle for loss, was consistently in the backfield off the edge. And we talked about it. This had a chance to be the best front four Chip Kelly's had, under his tenure. Through 5 games, that's really, looking accurate. With the Murphy twins coming out there making plays, Latu lighting up college football right now. So many awesome things going on for UCLA. And
Will, as we sort of close, isn't it so funny? And with UCLA fans, there's always that one eye on SC. But isn't it so funny how slowly these teams are starting to be kind of mirror images of one another in a sense. You've got Caleb and DTR, these explosive quarterbacks, Charbonnet and Travis Dye, although they do it differently, so effective with the ground game and so effective receiving. Addison on one side, Jake Bobo on the other, Shane Lee on one side, Latu on the other, an opportunistic secondary that's going to give up some plays, but hopefully make some interceptions. Isn't it just so beautifully set up? Long way to go, but isn't it so beautifully set up for Los Angeles football if that happens?
And if we can get through Utah next week, there's going to be no taming down our expectations because we're going to be thinking Rose Bowl or bust at that point, going 6-0 after coming off beating 2 ranked opponents, going into Outson after the bye week. Madman, always a pleasure. I'll be seeing you tonight at some point, getting some celebratory drinks for our Bruins. Much love, guys. Let's pack the Rose Bowl next Saturday once again. Let's hope game day is there. We're going to have a lot of content coming to you this week for the Bruin Bible. Maybe even another draft is in session, so stay tuned. Bruin Bible and LA Football Network, we are officially